He's from New England to California and remains an avid motorsports fan. Please help me in joining this very honored guest of ours, Jim McCraw, to the front.
Right now, let's do it. This is for you to help you keep track.
Oh, okay.
As we go. Thank you for that amazingly too long introduction. How, can you hear me in the back? Okay, I'd rather not use the mic because it just, anyway. It's, the subject here is automotive journalism for fun and profit, mostly fun. And it's my dad's fault, you see. That would be picture 0. Good, we're coordinated. In 1947, my dad took me to a place called Langhorne Speedway, north of Philadelphia. And in a sea of passenger cars that at that time were black, gray, navy blue, you could see cars like this, painted, no exhaust system, chrome, loud. And from the age of 4, I was hooked. I am a car nut through and through. There's nothing you can do about it. You either have it or you don't. We moved to Norfolk, Virginia because my dad was a Navy lifer, and that's the next one. And he took me out one evening, well, fairly long ride. And I said, where are we going? He said, you'll see when we get there. And we got to this clearing and there were all these cool cars. And I said, what's going on? He said, just watch. So a car next, a car very much like this one, was sat in the highway next to a 36 Ford Coupe. And the next thing I know, they all went down the road. I said, what is this? And my dad said, that's drag racing. I said, cool. So I had the car thing, and then I acquired the drag racing bug. And the next thing he did for me was he took me to a whole bunch of these different bull rings in and around Norfolk, Virginia. There were quarter-mile dirt tracks, and they were called jalopies. And so if you sat close, you ended up completely covered with dust at the end of the night, but everybody loved it. And it was cheap, and it was loud, and it was colorful. And so I was attracted to that kind of stuff. Oh, and next, Dad also acquired motorcycles. So what's a kid gonna do? You know, I just grew up in this, and I had my first story published when I was in junior high school. I wrote a story about drug addiction for a class, and my teacher liked it so much, he turned it over to the school, and the school published it in the school newspaper. So I was a published author at 13. Okay, where are we? Motorcycles. Okay, so we moved back to Philadelphia. I graduate from high school, and 2 weeks later, I stumble into the best deal imaginable for me. This old line business publishing company called Chilton Company. And it's Chilton Company, not Chilton, Colorado. It's CO. Anyway, I got a job there in the mailroom in the very early part of the Mad Men era. And it was a great, great education. They taught me how to do editorial. I was offered a job right from the mailroom for one of the magazines, and the managing editor there took me right under his arm and said, I'm going to teach you all the basics. And pretty soon I had an actual byline in a nationally circulated magazine, and I was 18 years old. And about a year later, he said, called me into his little cubicle and he said, I think you should leave. I said, wait, what are you talking about? Am I fired? He said, no, I want you to go get an education and come back. And when you come back, there'll be a job here at Chilton at one of the magazines for you. But you're good at this, but you need to get a degree. So I went to this giant place in North Philadelphia called Temple University, which at the time had zero reputation in football and a big reputation in basketball. We were a power. And one of my classmates at the time was Bill Cosby, who his career went like this, and never mind that, not important. So they taught me all about business journalism at Temple University. I took every single course in the catalog. So while this was going on, next, I'm going to the drag races. Drag racing it was everywhere in greater Philadelphia. You could go 6 nights a week if you wanted to drive a little bit. Little tiny tracks that were made out of farmland, but I loved it. And I learned more and more about how you make a car go quicker and faster. And then, let's see, number 5 is next. What do we got here? That's a version of the kinds of cars that I was dealing with. I was in drag racing journalism from 67 to 73. Yes, ma'am. Higher, louder. Okay, I'll keep it up. And I was constantly involved with cars like this, and I got a really, really good offer. A guy called me from California and said, look, we've been watching you for a few years. We like your act. We know you can do this. Why don't you come out here and work for Hot Rod Magazine? And that was in the fall of 73. And by the spring of 74, I was the editor-in-chief of the largest automotive magazine in the world, Hot Rod Magazine, which at that time had more revenue and more circulation than Car and Driver, Road and Track, or any of the rest of them. We were big. We were the flagship of Peterson Publishing. Mr. Peterson started the magazine in 1948, and no matter what, the company was awash in enthusiast magazines. We had Carcraft, Hot Rod, Motor Trend, Skin Diver, Hunting, Guns and Ammo, Teen, this all about enthusiasm and youth and recreation. And there I was in a building on the corner of Sunset Boulevard and La Cienega, and my apartment was on Hollywood Boulevard, and I thought I was really cool. Wow, I'm 30 years old. I'm the editor of the biggest car magazine in the world. So every once in a while in your life, the phone rings back. But there we go. I was minding my own business when the phone rings and the new editor at Motor Trend says, why don't you come up here and write for adults? Were cars. Motor Trend was all about new cars. And that started me. This is a photo here from 1982, I think it is, of all of us testing Motor Trend Car of the Year at Riverside Raceway. I'm the guy that's me right there, wearing the cool shades and being almost as skinny as I am now. I want to go back to Hot Rod Magazine for just a minute, though, because when you're the editor-in-chief of the magazine, people call you up with all kinds of possibilities and story ideas and propositions, and some of them were bogus, but some of them were really good. When I was at Hot Rod Magazine, I was asked if I would like to spend a long weekend on the United States Navy carrier Kitty Hawk. I said, an aircraft carrier? You're going to take me out on an aircraft? I said, yep. sign me up. And I spent 4 days, 125 miles west of San Diego on an aircraft carrier, watching it all, including night takeoffs and night landings, in a place so dark you can't even believe it, out in the middle of the Pacific. I mean, and later on, I got to fly. I actually got to pilot the Goodyear blimp. We, in the editorial side of things, we scored a major hit with a cover that we figured out of Richard Petty. We don't usually put NASCAR stuff on the cover of Hot Rod. It's about hot rods, customs, and drag racing. But we put Richard Petty and his entire crew and the car and an Irish setter on the cover of the magazine. And before it came out, we called every distributor in the entire Southeast and said, you better order more copies, fellas, because Richard's going to be on the next cover. And it went, set an all-time record for single issue sales. So we did some pretty cool things when I was at Hot Rod. And then when I got to Motor Trend, with all, you can see, we had endless supplies of brand new cars to test, photograph, evaluate, do mileage tests on. This is what we did every day, except when we had to go someplace, and we went everywhere. When I was at Motor Trend, I made 33 trips to Japan myself. And there were other guys on the magazine that did the same sort of thing all the time. So let's see, Motor Trend we have here. Yeah. The car companies then and now, they want you to come and see their new product. So they're willing to entice you with an airplane ticket and a hotel room. So why wouldn't you go? Especially because there's a story at the end. And that's the reason why I went to Japan 33 times. I have to tell you a little secret. My editor at the time was this tall. And he went to Japan and he was looking up at people and he didn't like it. So he never went to Japan again. He said, from now on, you're the tallest guy on the staff, you're going to Japan. And so I did. The first time I went to Japan was in 1975 because I was the only person at Hot Rod Magazine that had a license to ride a motorcycle. And this invitation came in the morning mail. Hey, how'd you like to come to Hamamatsu City in the middle of July and ride all of our new bikes? This was Yamaha. So I flew all the way to Japan with my leathers and my boots and my helmet and my gloves. And we went to the test track and he said, here's all the new bikes. And I was there with a bunch of journalists from the motorcycle magazines. And we all had a great time until about 10:30 in the morning. Then it started to get really hot. You can't imagine what it's like to be in Japan in July wearing leathers from here all the way down. It was really hot, but I thought, I got a free trip to Japan. This is really cool. Well, things changed a whole lot when I was enticed to leave Motor Trend magazine and go to work for Ford Motor Company as a PR person, introducing new products. And at that time, we, the company, were going back into motorsports after a long absence. And so I hit it at exactly the right time. Ford Motor Company went back into NASCAR. We went back into road racing. And most importantly, we went back into Formula One, the best cars in the world, the quickest, fastest, most technologically advanced cars in the world. And we were back as the engine supplier. And that was all terrific. I was the manager of motorsports PR while all of this was happening around me with the staff and agencies going to the races all the time on the company's money, which is not bad. That's part of the profit part of fun and profit, when you don't have to shell out and the next thing you know, you're on the company plane going to Daytona. Oh, okay, we like that. The best thing that I did at Ford Motor Company was I was on a very small team that created the introduction of the Ford Taurus, the first family-sized front-wheel drive car Ford ever built. That was introduced in February of 1986, and by 1987, it was the Motor Trend Car of the Year, and by 1988, it was the best-selling car in the United States. So we did our jobs, and that's a story for maybe a whole other presentation, because it was really, really complicated to get all these people who had this conception of Ford Motor Company to say, wait a minute, you can build a front wheel drive car and sell it here? So that was big for me. But all things have to come to an end, and my career at Ford Motor Company ended, and this became my office. That's a 747-400, because now I'm a freelancer. I gave up Ford Motor Company. They gave me a very nice parting check. It was enormous. And so I said, well, I know how to do this. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to go freelance. And I called some people that I knew and said, how would you like to borrow some of my time so that I can travel instead of your staff traveling? And they said, okay. So starting in the middle of 1990, I became a freelance automotive journalist. And as I said, that 747 was my office. I have to go back to my notes to read all of this because it's kind of silly. I have now stayed overnight in every single country in Western Europe, including the little ones, Monaco and San Marino and Liechtenstein. And beyond, I have to get my list out here so I can show you. That picture there is from one of my little trips that I made. That's at the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of South Africa. They invited me to go over there and drive that thing, which is a AMG Mercedes McLaren that costs $450,000 each. That was the longest trip I think I've ever made from home base in Detroit, because we had to go to Atlanta, then New York, and then to Johannesburg, and then to Cape Town, and then we got to drive the car. But it was a fabulous experience. So in addition to my travels to Europe and the 33 times I went to Japan, I've also stayed in Iceland, Korea, Brazil, Slovenia, Kazakhstan, China, Mongolia, the Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, South Africa, and Lapland, which is as close to the North Pole as you can get. This is another trip that I made because I said before I ride motorcycles. BMW said, hey, we're introducing this whole new series of bikes. How would you like to go to the intro? I said, great, where is it? He said, South Africa. He said, sign me up. Riding a motorcycle in South Africa was one of the most freeing things I think I've ever done in my life. On the wrong side of the road, but still, the people there were amazing. And I've been there a couple times since with Jaguar, Aston Martin, and a couple other car companies. But South Africa is really a wonderful place to hang out. During the course of that time, I was asked to become part of the North American Car and Truck of the Year jury that votes every year. And every once in a while, you get to go on something really special. This is a picture of me holding up the #1 plate at the 100th anniversary of Mercedes-Benz. This is in Monaco. And they gave us a whole bunch of car keys and said, okay, here's the drive route. We'll see you at lunch. So that car there is a $2.3 million Mercedes-Benz Cabriolet. And I drove it with one of my good buddies up into the mountains above Monaco. Beautiful spring day. We stopped for lunch. And 10 minutes later, it started to snow in April in Monaco on the Mediterranean. But we're now up in the mountains. And I said to my pal Randy, I said, we have a $2.3 million car in the snow, riding on tires this wide. We have no chance. We're never going to make it down the mountain. But we did. We didn't dent anything. We almost ran out of gas. But I mean, this is the kind of nonsense you can get involved in automotive journalism if you stick around long enough. That was a very, very special event. I still have the hat. I still have the jacket, and that #1 plate hangs over my desk. I have a particular fondness for Mercedes-Benz. I've owned 5 of them, and they've been very nice to me over the years. I want to switch now to some of the stuff that comes along when you're a freelancer. That is a 1936 Ford Cabriolet that pulled up opposite me at the gas station on 44, just like that. And I said, whoa, that's the most beautiful 36 Ford I've ever seen in my life. And he said, well, it just won the trophy as the most beautiful 36 Ford in the country. So I said, would you like to accompany me over to the polo field so I can shoot pictures and do a story? He said, sure. The car is patterned after FDR's personal car, the one that he had fitted with hand controls. And it's the same color, Washington blue. So I did a story on that, and I made friends with the guy here in the Villages, and we kept in touch. And now he's moved on way south. Okay, next, please. This is one of the nicest custom cars I've ever had anything to do with. It was a car that was built, believe it or not, in 1958 in Detroit by a guy and his buddies. And then it disappeared for years, and it resurfaced under a new owner. He had it completely redone. It's impossible to catch. That's white pearl paint. And no matter what you do as a photographer, you can't really get pearl to end up in the image. But I got as close as I could. And I borrowed that house from the director of design of Ford Motor Company, who was an old pal from my previous life. I said, can I shoot this T-Bird in front of your garage door? He said, sure, come on down. And we had a lovely chat. He's a great guy. But those are some of the crazy things. What do we have here that's next after the T-Bird? This is a drag race car that I uncovered in suburban Chicago. This guy, who was a painter and paper hanger, decided he was going to build a 32 Ford race car. This was in the time before the National Hot Rod Association even existed. And he built the car, and he took it to this Air Force base in Wisconsin from Chicago. And he raced it one time, and he put it back on the trailer. And on the way home, he said, I'm an idiot. What did I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I have a business. So that car, as decrepit as it is, made exactly 1 run in its entire life. And I found out about it. I photographed it. And the odometer that keeps track of your mileage, it had 0.8 miles on it. 0.8. It's only been down the drag strip once, then it was on the trailer and gone. Next, please. My pal Bob took a $1 million Mercedes-Benz Gullwing Coupe and ruined it. He turned it into a Bonneville car. And for 13 years, every August, he took it out to Bonneville in Utah to try to set a record. And every single time something went south or broke. Try number 14 yielded finally a record. That is the world's fastest gullwing. It went 191 miles an hour, was certified, and then recognized by Mercedes-Benz itself as the world's fastest gullwing. And I thought, well, you ruined $1 million car. He said, well, not exactly. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I just sold the car without the engine in it for $950,000. So not bad. Next, please. Motorcycles. This motorcycle was built from the ground up by a guy in Stevensville, Michigan, with a 572 cubic inch Chrysler Hemi engine in it. He turned every nut, he made every weld. He did this in his garage, including the paint and the lettering. And then he fitted it. You can see on the rear axle, that chromey thing there, that is a canister of nitrous oxide, because it didn't have enough power with 572 cubic inches. Next, please. Okay, now I'm going to switch to racing. When I worked at Superstock magazine starting in 1967, I'd been there 2 weeks. And my boss walked in and he had a letter in his hand. He said, "These are your credentials." I said, "What credentials?" He said, "You're going to the Daytona 500 in 2 weeks." So it was so different then. It's hard to describe. This is a photograph of Mario Andretti, perhaps the greatest American racing driver who ever lived. He was asked to come to the 67 Daytona 500 and race this car. He won. The only NASCAR race that Mario Andretti ever entered, and I was there. That's not my photo, but I was there. And that, I went back to Daytona many, many, many times since for the 500, for the 24 hours, the sports car race, which is coming up shortly, and for the 200 motorcycle race, which is the nastiest one in the country. Next, please. This is the Blue Deuce. This was Roger Penske's car that I covered much later after it retired. And the next one, that's Indy, which I'll talk about in just a minute. The NASCAR side, I have now been to Daytona, Charlotte, Watkins Glen, Atlanta, Talladega, Pocono, Riverside, and MIS for NASCAR races. And then my boss, Mr. Peterson, operated a suite in turn 2 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for years. He paid them a huge amount of money and said, "When you need another check, let me know. I want that suite." So he could entertain his advertising guests and his family. So we had access to that suite every May. You just get on the plane, go to Indianapolis, had a room, had the credentials, and it was your job to entertain the advertisers. My boss actually created a wonderful piece of machinery. He took a Halliburton Zero camera case. You know what those look like? Aluminum, beautiful. He opened it up and he rigged a blender to come up out of the suitcase, and it had salt, limes, and tequila in there. So it was a portable margarita maker. And he would walk into the suite in Indianapolis with this thing, open the top, swing up the blender, plug it in, said, "Anybody want a margarita?" So big time fun at the Indy 500, no question about it. I was lucky enough to be there. This is Daytona. This is Kenny Roberts, one of the greatest motorcycle champions that ever lived. I watched him lap the entire field at the Daytona 24-hour, at the Daytona 200 rather, and won the race, and he won the #1 plate. He was a multi-time champion. I found that photo and I thought I should throw that in, because to see somebody go from the middle of the pack and pass everybody in a 200-mile race, it was, nobody'd ever done that before. And I was there to see that. So, okay, next we have the 24 Hours of Le Mans. My opinion, the greatest race ever. I've been there 5 different times over the years with Audi, Bentley, Cadillac, Oldsmobile, and who else? Jaguar. To this, for most people, this would be a bucket list job. You just have to go to Le Mans once. Well, I've been there 5 times and it's indescribable. The track is 8.3 miles, 1 lap. And if your car breaks 4 miles around, you have no hope. You'll never get it back to the pits. So that's what they tried to avoid. Let's just brake on the front straight if we have to brake.
Jim, I think we might need to have you back sometime to finish because we gotta cut off. Appreciate
I'm
it.
practically there.
Okay, good. And then we want a few questions.
Okay. This is, for example, one of the dives that they make you stay at when you go to the 24 hours of Le Mans with a car company. They spent $30 million tuning that place up. Okay, so this is vintage racing. This is vintage sports car racing. Next, vintage Indianapolis car racing, which I have covered. This was the Porsche anniversary. That's one of the fastest Porsches ever built right there. Next, this is the fastest car there is. This is called the Speed Demon at Bonneville. This little baby with 1 engine and 2 turbochargers went 460 miles an hour at Bonneville. 460 miles an hour. Next, please. Motorcycles. That's my ride that I roared out in the 80th anniversary of BMW. They gave us motorcycles at Lake Tahoe and said, see you at dinner. So we were able to ride all around that area for a few days. Now, quickly, some people. That's Linda Vaughn, the queen of American motorsports. Next, this is my pal, Roger Penske, the greatest racer ever. This is Dan Gurney. This was shot at the special Edison Awards honoring him back in Dearborn, Michigan a few years ago. And that's a bumper sticker that Car and Driver magazine created long time ago when he was really popular. They wanted him to run for president. Next, Mario Andretti. I shot this picture at the Motorsports Hall of Fame here in Daytona a few years ago. I think that's one of the best shots I ever shot of anybody. It just worked out fine. Next, Carroll Shelby. He was a fixture at Peterson Publishing Company. He used to come up every Wednesday for lunch, and he'd have lunch and BS with anybody in the building. He was a great guy. John Cooper Fitch, American war hero, first and only American driver ever hired by Mercedes-Benz, won the GT class in 1955 at the Mille Miglia in Italy. And I was a participant in rebuilding his race car. Next, that's the car that my friend Bob did from wreckage to that to present to John Fitch. That's a copy of his 1952 Carrera Panamericana race car. He cried when he saw it. This is Danny Thompson, son of Mickey Thompson. Next, and this is the car he drives, went 442 miles an hour and change, and put him in the poorhouse. This car was built in 1962 and was stored for 50 years until Danny got it out of storage, rebuilt it, took it to Bonneville, and set a record with it. I admire he's absolutely broke. He has not a nickel, but he got the record in his dad's car 50 years later. That's a story. That's what I live for, is I live for the story. Next, please. This is Mendy Fry, 47 years old, looks like an Italian countess, and this is what she drives. A fuel dragster. First woman ever to win a championship in vintage drag racing, and the only person to win it twice in a row. 47-year-old accountant. And this is the kind of drag racing that I do now. Vintage drag racing, it's a fabulous sport. Everybody's got lots lot older. People are in their 80s now, but they still go and we still have a great time hanging out. Next, please. That's my restoration project. I got that car for nothing, in bad shape, and in 2.5 years and $10,000, I made it look like that. And that's my tie to the Navy and to every time that the Blue Angels are anywhere close, I go see them and shoot pictures. The aviation is another part of what I do. Shoot, next. Oh, I had an alligator in there just for. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to ask, where'd you live in Detroit?
Dearborn,
Oh, okay. I live in Bloomfield Hills.
you did better.
Wendy?
I have actually two things.
Shoot.
My husband rides motorcycle trials bikes. Have you ever done anything with moto trials where there's no seat on the motorcycle and you go up over cliffs and rocks and they're from Spain?
Yes. You mean something like a Montesa?
Yeah.
Yes, I've ridden Montesa. Trials bikes have nothing. I mean, it's just a little tiny motor and you're on your own and you go up in the rocks, and if you fall over, you fall over, but it's very, very difficult.
Second part to that question is I'm a powered paramotor pilot. So I run into the sky or have my trike go up into the sky. Have you ever heard of those?
No. No, that's my honest answer. No, I don't know anything about that. Anybody else?
Amazing. We have-
It's been a real treat to come and hang out with you folks for an hour and a half, especially when you have a guy like Dick telling you all the good stuff that you're all up to all the time. You never stop, do you? You never stop. And that is a credit to each and every one of you. I want to thank you again for your attention, for your interest. And where is he? That's his fault,
Yeah, great. Yeah.
right?
Great.
Wait till I see him at the next meeting of the Mercedes-Benz Club. My stick back.
Wow, thank you, everybody. Just remember, see Joe Nolan for your sign-up form. If you want to do a Valentine's Day interview, it is super fun. Come and see me, and have an email lookout for signups for volunteering for the Chili Cook-Off Home and Garden Show. So please. And the board meeting is right now in 10 minutes. If you need to take a bathroom break after the meeting ends. So Ira, will you lead us on our 4-way test, please? I appreciate it.
For all the things we do.
Of all the things. Man, guys, all right, let's try one more time, all together. Ira.
For all the things.
There we go.
They say.
Is it true? Is it all goodwill and better friendships? Will be beneficial to all concerned. And is it fun? Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.